Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. It is the final stop of the spring football tour, and we ended off with a bang in Champaign, Illinois today, talking all things Fighting Illini football at the University of Illinois. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Big Ten podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Friday, April 23rd, and our tour guide today in Champaign is a person very familiar with that college campus. It is the former sports editor of the Daily Illini, now a football and baseball beat writer for the Daily Illini. It is Gabby Hajduk joining us to talk all things Illinois in the first year under Bert. Yes, Bret Bielema, the only new head coach for the 2021 Big Ten football season. Gabby, a pleasure to have you here making your debut on the Locked On Big Ten podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm like the second Daily Illini person now to be on here. So we're just really repping student newspaper down in Champaign. My best friend, Brandon Simberg's always on here talking basketball. So I'm excited to be able to be your tour guide in Champaign today. Wonderful.
It is wonderful to have you here. The final stop of the spring football tour. All 14 programs at the conclusion of today's episode will be done. This is the last school in the Big Ten West. Before we dive into Illinois this spring, I ask you, who are you more excited to spend time with this upcoming fall? Is it Bret Bielema or is it Brandon Simberg?
Oh, no.
There's a right answer here, I think. If I'm being honest, I think there's a right answer.
Bret.
That's the right answer. That's exactly the right. I can't even think that Brandon would be insulted by all. You know, like I think you made the right choice.
Yeah, I think he'd be more so offended if I picked him because he knows how, near and dear to my heart sports journalism is. So I'll go with Bret Bielema. Very excited to spend some quality time, hopefully maybe some in-person press conferences with him this coming fall. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, indeed. That will be very exciting. Like I mentioned, Bert, as he is fondly known on this podcast or across the Big Ten Conference, or as everybody knows him, Bret Bielema, the new head coach at Champaign for that Illinois football program, the only new head coaching hire that was made this offseason for the entire Big Ten Conference. So spring practice is pretty much wrapping up this week for the Illinois Fighting Illini. What did you make of Bret's first spring as the head football coach at Illinois?
Yeah, so they're wrapping up this week. I think it's been a successful spring, I would say, just in terms of really the whole program. I mean, when he first came in, he said he wanted to retain a lot of the seniors and a lot of the guys on the Lovie Smith's last team, and he wanted to make strides in recruiting, especially in state. He's done both of those things. I mean, I think they're have 87% of the team from last year back, which is insane. They have the most seniors back, at least in the conference. I'm not sure about in the country. And he's locked up a lot of really solid recruits, especially on the offensive line, which is huge because their whole offensive line is pretty much seniors, veterans. So he's done what he's promised in a really short amount of time. And I think that's huge because you make these big promises to fans who have been longing for Illinois football to make its comeback if it ever was really there. But Illinois fans have really been longing for football to be important at this school again. And he's made some big promises and he's fulfilled those. And I think that's all you can really ask for with a new coach in the first few months. I mean, he made incredible staff hires. I mean, I'm sure I can speak for every beat writer covering Illinois football that this staff is incredible. They're so fun to talk to. They're so bought in on Bielema and his vision and what he wants to bring to the program. So I think when you look at the team and what I saw from them in the spring game, more past just the physicality and just football, they looked like a team again, together. They looked like they were having fun. They barely looked like they were ever having fun last year with this past season, mostly because they were getting stomped on every game. But it was cool to see just the team look like a competent and fun together team again.
I think from the outside as well, there is excitement around this Illinois football program because of what Bret Bielema has done since he took over the head coaching job. And like you mentioned there, Gabby, his ability to recruit in-state. It was one of the first things he said in that introductory press conference. I'm going to get the Illinois state troopers to block off the state border and keep the talent that we have in this state for Illinois. And I think so far he has done a great job of that and now working through his first spring practice as well. You mentioned the spring game. It was on Monday night. Another thing I love that Bert did to give us some football to watch on a Monday evening. Were you there watching the spring game, and what were your impressions?
Yeah, so I was there at the game. Night football, you gotta love it. And his big thing was like he wanted to give his team the proper like publicity that he thinks they deserve, which I think is cool. Like I think they do deserve, to be in the spotlight a little. They're a new coaching staff, everything, but the spring game was cool. The first half was definitely better than the second half. The second half, it was like the clock went down to 10 minutes or like 12 minutes, and then the fourth quarter was 8 minutes because they were running out of their Big Ten time slot or Big Ten network time slot. Got to speed things up. But the first half was good. It was really nice to see Brandon Peters look comfortable on the football field again. Like all of last year, besides maybe the Nebraska game, he looked so out of place. I mean, he didn't even play a couple games because of him catching COVID and then, all the Big Ten protocols that kept him out for 3 weeks. But he just never, like that first Wisconsin game, he looked so out of place, so uncomfortable, as did the entire team, especially the offense. But he never really looked like he did back in 2019. And I think he looked really like a really solid quarterback in 2019. He looked like he had a lot of potential for the next year, and then it kind of all just fell apart last year. So I really enjoyed seeing him look comfortable. And the biggest thing is he passed to multiple receivers, and not just receivers, but tight ends. Because last year, if you paid any attention to Illinois football, you know that Brandon Peters had eyes locked on Josh Imatorbhebhe the whole time. Maybe throw a little Daniel Barker in there if we got lucky.
Maybe, yeah.
But that was the occasional Bebe's just not in the game for some reason. So it was good to see him have those connections with other receivers. And the big connection that every fan was talking about on Twitter was Brandon Peters and Luke Ford. Because we didn't get that. We got that twice last year. We got 2 catches out of Luke Ford last year. And I don't even know if they came from Brandon Peters. They could have come from Isaiah Williams. I can't remember. Last season was a little bit of a blur, so I apologize. But Luke Ford and Brandon Peters looks like an incredible duo. I mean, Luke Ford came from Georgia. I mean, he got recruited really heavily out of high school. And then Lovie Smith somehow got him back here. He wanted to get closer to home. Some family things going on. Didn't get the waiver from the NCAA. Shocker. And so then everyone's excited for him to come in this past year, and we get nothing out of him. It was just like Lovie Smith did not want to use him at all. Rod Smith did not want to use him at all. And now we got a little taste of what Luke Ford is actually capable of. So that was very exciting to see.
In your article on the Daily Illini, from some of your takeaways from that spring game, you called Luke Ford your MVP. So I think that will be something that fans look forward to as Illinois gets ready to go through summer workouts and fall camp. I also appreciate you, Gabby Hajduk, because you transitioned me very well into my next question about that quarterback battle. You said Brandon Peters looked comfortable in that system on Monday night. Do you think it is Brandon Peters' job to lose to be the starting quarterback for Illinois in 2021?
Yeah, I think I kind of knew that the second Tony Peterson, the offensive coordinator, his introductory press conference mentioned Brandon Peters kind of unprovoked and just said he fit really well into the system that he wanted to run at Illinois. And not that I think Isaiah Williams has a lot of potential. I really liked what we saw out of him last year when he kind of had to step up into the spotlight. I think he has a ton of potential. I wouldn't mind him being the starting quarterback, but I do think Bielema and Tony Peterson are more like traditional football guys in terms of just okay, we want a pro style quarterback, not so much of more of a running quarterback, not so much of a Lamar Jackson that Isaiah Williams maybe reminds you of a little bit. But yeah, I think it's Brandon Peters' job to lose. I mean, he obviously was technically the starter in the spring game, which doesn't mean too much, But I also just think he has more experience. I mean, he has more, I would say, NFL potential between the two. And I just think he fits better into the system. One thing that they keep kind of like both Tony Peterson and Bielema keep saying about Brandon Peters is they're trying to get his like leadership style up. Because if you've ever covered Brandon Peters, if you've ever watched like a press conference or anything with him, he is so quiet, does not like to talk, which is fine. I mean, everybody has different styles of leadership, but I think they're trying to bring that side out of him a little more. So assuming they can get that out of him, I really think it's his job going into the fall, unless something crazy happens with him or Isaiah just goes crazy in the summer.
And Brandon Peters also a pretty good runner himself, but you mentioned the offensive scheme. Is it going to be bully ball that Bret Bielema publicized so well during his time in Wisconsin? Is that what we can expect to see? Bully ball back in the Big Ten?
I don't see. I thought so. And then in the spring game, they come out and throw more. And maybe that was just to get Peters comfortable with the wide receivers. Again, it's the spring game. It's not like it's an actual game, so they're not really trying to win anything. So maybe they were just trying to get more practice, because Bielema said he really wanted to see how his receivers caught during that spring game, because he said the practice before, there were no dropped balls before the spring game, the one practice they had, and he was really impressed by that. So maybe they were just trying to see how the receivers and Peters really meshed with each other, like on an actual game setting. But I do think come the fall, we're going to see a lot of that run style. And they have really good running backs to go with that. And of course, a great offensive line. I think everybody in the Big Ten knows how strong Illinois' offensive line is. But I really like, obviously, Chase Brown is back again. And we saw what he was capable of last year. I mean, he, was just really good. He's a strong running back. He doesn't get tackled easily. He's quick. Really fun guy to talk to. Also, great interview if you ever get the chance. But and then you have two newish guys. Chase Hayden comes in, who Bret Bielema has worked with before Arkansas. He's recruited him twice now. Really see something in him, and he was really impressive in the spring game. Another guy who was just making guys miss. And again, you have to take it in stride because it was the backup defense. But still, I mean, he was just missing, like swerving tackles, breaking tackles. It was really cool to see. And then someone I was really impressive with was Reggie Love, who's a redshirt freshman. Didn't really play much last year. And he was just like really quick, very shifty guy, very quick. Bielema had a lot of good things to say about him. So I think if you have three really strong, but like high ceiling running backs behind a really, really possibly the best offensive line in the Big Ten, I don't know why you wouldn't go for a more like run first style.
I can't wait to see it. I hope we see the new iteration of bully ball back in the Big Ten Conference. So as we flip to the other side of the ball, a new defensive coordinator, of course, in Ryan Walters coming over from Missouri. What can we expect to see out of Illinois' defensive scheme for 2021?
Yeah, so he has made it very clear that he's not setting on like one scheme. He's not, we know with Lovey, we ran Tampa 2 and that was it. And we
really?
know
Lovey Smith ran the Tampa 2? You don't say.
Really crazy. And only ran it ever, never anything else. That's not what we're going to get from this defense. And I really, really like that, because if you look at any of the Big Ten stats from the past couple of years, Illinois has one of the worst defensive teams, especially just like run game, but also the defensive backs have really struggled to lock up any receivers in the Big Ten. But I do like what Ryan Walters is bringing. They came out more in like a 3-4 set, I would say, but they did a little like 4-2-5 action. And what I really liked is they're disguising their outside linebackers. So like Owen Carney and Isaiah Gay got shifted from the defensive line to outside linebacker, along with Seth Coleman and a couple other guys, down the ladder. But I really like that because you don't know if they're going to drop back, they're going to rush. And I think that is going to help the Illinois defensive line actually disrupt quarterbacks this season. They got almost no quarterback pressure last season, and that's why every quarterback's like that came in and played Illinois, they had like 2 incompletions because they had no pressure, and there was really nothing happening up in the front. So I really like what Ryan Walters is doing with that. And I was really impressed by Owen Carney and Isaiah Gay. Isaiah Gay is someone who he's a veteran, this is his last season, but he hasn't really lived up to the potential that people thought he was going to have. I mean, he has great size, and then Owen Carney comes in, and they just both looked so physical in the spring game. They were putting all the pressure on Isaiah Williams. He was looking uncomfortable. For someone who can usually not feel uncomfortable in the situations and can weave his way out of things, very fast guy, but they looked really good. So I really like those position changes, and I think that's going to pay off. Just overall, it's going to help the defensive line. So yeah, I like, especially what's going on up front. The defensive back situation is still a little thin. Marquez Beeson, which was Lovie Smith's huge recruit of his time here at Illinois, which was really impressive. Was a highly rated guy, recruited by almost every Power 5 college in the country, has now switched to wide receiver, which is really weird to me because they're already super thin at defensive back. Not saying that Marquez can't be a really good wide receiver, because I'm sure if they're making the move, he has potential in that area. Right. But they're just so thin, in the secondary. And the secondary is where Illinois struggled so much last year. I mean, they just blown coverages all the time. And then you lose Nate Hobbs, who's pursuing the NFL draft. And so now you're kind of left with a really thin group. I mean, you have Tony Adams, who kind of has played everywhere in that defensive back area. So he's really good. You also have Devin Witherspoon, who looked really good last season. Derek Smith is out there, but he wasn't playing in the spring game. He's dealing with an injury, I think, still. Sidney Brown also wasn't out there. He's safety. So had some guys out with injuries, so you couldn't really see the full defensive back, I guess, what you're going to expect to see in the fall. Right. But if I'm worried about anything, I am still worried about that position group. But other than that, I do like what Ryan Walters is doing with the defense, especially, like I said, up front. I really like that.
You would think there's only one way to go, and that would be up, because Illinois finished last in the Big Ten last year in total defense, last in rushing defense. So hopefully some improvement in 2021 for Ryan Walters and the entire Illinois team. So, Gabby, I ask you this. We are now wrapping up spring football. This is the last stop of the spring football tour here on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Still a lot of time to go to get through summer workouts, to get to fall camp, then to get to the 2021 college football season. But what do you think is a realistic level of expectation for Bret Bielema in Illinois in year number 1 at the helm?
I've thought a lot about this, and I've gone back and forth on it a lot. And I don't think you can put number of wins. I don't think that will really emphasize the expectation, because I don't know. I don't think number of wins matters in year 1 of a new coaching change. Obviously, Illinois went to the bowl game 2 years ago, and everybody thought that was the whole turnaround. That wasn't the case. I think not that it was a fluke, because that team looked really strong at points, but I just don't think it was a real embodiment of what that team was, or what that team, could be. I think that year was great, but I don't think you can expect a bowl game appearance right now. And I think that's fair, especially with a whole new coaching staff. It's not like you've really gotten a ton of new guys. So you're retaining pretty much the same roster with a couple stronger additions. But I think the expectation is just to look like a competent football team on every facet, in every facet of the game, defense, offense, special teams, just everywhere. You need to look like you're going in the right direction to compete in the Big Ten. And I think that's not necessarily the amount of wins you have, but how you compete in each game and how close you get to those, harder wins. Illinois was getting blown out a lot last year, Wisconsin. Let's take that for example. If, say, that was this coming year and you're playing Wisconsin, which I'm pretty sure they do again, you need to score on the offensive end. You need to at least show some competition. So that's my expectation, is just to compete in every game. They're not playing Ohio State this year, so I think they can compete in every game that they have. And unless they're look like this past year, where by the second half you just know it's you could literally leave the game and miss nothing important and write your entire recap just based on the first game. I don't want to see that this year. I think you need to just see every game. You should be in at least till the third quarter, fourth quarter type of thing. So I'm not looking for a number of wins. I think they could maybe win about 4 to 5. So if I am going to give like an exact number of wins, I think I would say 4 to 5. But I wouldn't give more than that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they only got 3. You know what I'm saying? I think it's just about how close you get in those like potential win situations.
The Bret Bielema revenge game against Wisconsin happens week number 6. It will be in Champaign, so that's a good note for Illinois fans. But I agree with your point there, Gabby. I think for first-year head coaches, it's all about showing the fan base you are making positive strides in gains. I think Scott Frost, a guy that is obviously coaching at Nebraska right now, when he was at UCF, he would highlight what they would do on the field and highlight specific things they did well, like pass breakups or little things that felt like Central Florida was progressing in the right way. I think if Bret Bielema can do that in year number 1, it will be a large improvement for Illinois, and the future will be bright for the Illinois football program. And that, folks, is how you do it. That is how you wrap up the spring football tour here on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Incredible insight from Gabby Hajduk, a football and baseball beat writer for the Daily Illini, the former sports editor at the Daily Illini, and Brandon Sidberg's best friend. Great insight and analysis, Gabby, to end out the spring football tour talking all things Illinois. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. It was so fun. Hopefully my appearance was a little better than Brandon's. I'm gonna tell him
sky high.
Yeah, we're just gonna tell him it was, no matter what.
Oh, I'm gonna DM him right after this and be like, dude, sorry, man. I don't even think I can bring you back on for basketball anymore. Gabby just stole the show.
Yeah, I can talk basketball too. I cover basketball too. So I'm stealing his spot. I'm coming for
you. There you go. There you go. Not only does she not want to hang out with you next fall, Brandon, she'd rather hang out with Bret Bielema. She's taking your spot on the Locked On Big Ten podcast as well. Gabby, thank you very much for your time again.
Thank you.